Good rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Waking up with Tayla Andre has nothing to do with the time of day that you watch this video, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. Today is the day that the Lord hath made, and we are sitting down with Christian White, who is, I want to say he is an underground activist, and I say that because not too many people know your name yet, but we are going to definitely change that. You guys know how much I advocate for fathers' rights, and I love dads. And he, if you read the hat, from single cell to single dad, we're gonna be talking about his journey becoming a single dad, and why he has posters, signs. What are they called?
Flyers.
Flyers. Yes. Yeah, flyers all over the city. Advocating to and for men of color specifically that are out here in these streets. And I love the way how the flyers are literally in the streets. Like, you pass by dozens of them and then you go into labor and actually read it. But
that's what I think is important. Let them know how you saw it, or that you passed by them many times.
Yes.
And finally took notice when
I was in labor.
Your baby was coming into this world.
Yes, yes. So, Christian White, please tell the audience who you are and why you have flyers over the city, and a little bit about you, so we can get a background.
So I'll give the version that I typically give, and then I'll go deeper as the conversation unfolds. So my name's Christian White. I'm 39 years old. I grew up right up the street on Humboldt Avenue, Roxbury, Mass, Boston. Fully active in the gang life for many, many, many years. Did just about over half my life in prisons, institutions, DSS, DYS, the whole gambit. And I've done 3 state sentences and 3 county sentences. My last sentence, I was given 10 years for possession of an illegal firearm. I served just about 9 years. When I went in, my son's mom, whose name's Little Christian, he wasn't born yet. She was 8.5 months pregnant. When I was on the inside, I saw him about 3 times when he was an infant, twice when he was 2 years old, and we were reunited when he was just about turning 9. And I hit the ground running in terms of being an active dad. After about the 6th year, it really dawned on me that I had been following the same pattern and routine throughout my life for far too long, and that if I truly wanted to make a change, I needed to start with my patterns. But we'll get further into that. So when I got out, I hit the ground running, and due to some unfortunate yet fortunate circumstances, I became a single dad just about a year ago, and I'm a full-time dad, take care of my son full-time. And much respect to single moms, I have a little bit more of an understanding at this point.
So let me ask you a question. When you came out, we know just from statistics, when men come out of jail, prison, they're unable to get jobs because of the quarries. They're unable to get housing. They're unable to be stable. How were you not only able to come out and be stable enough for yourself, but to be able to provide for a child?
So first and foremost, when I talk about the pattern, my personal pattern typically revolved around doubting my value, first and foremost. Because most people tend to ask me, well, how did you change? Why did you change? These are by far the 2 most important questions that people ask me on a regular basis. And what I explain to them is I really haven't changed at all. Because just as hard as I go for the posters and my page and my son is just as hard as I went shooting at people. It's the same energy. It's just expended differently. And a lot of that's because my pattern is different now. So what I had to accept is that while I may have been a lieutenant, captain, general on the street, once I made that transition into the mainstream society, I wasn't going to be shit. And I had to accept that. because there are some skills that are transferable, whether it's, you know, math skills from selling drugs to being in a work environment, whatever certain ways you talk to people, because since I've been home, I've been a waiter, and the same way I use the gift of gab in the street is the same way I use the gift of gab for serving a table to get a tip. So certain skills were transferable, but for the things that weren't, for the things that only held me back, for instance, anger, quick to being rageful, not looking more than a few minutes into the future. Things like these, I had to recognize that while on one level of society, they were great skills to have because in essence, they could keep you alive. Once you transition to another level of society, those would prove to be your death. So with my pattern, I came to realize, whether it was from the streets into the prisons, so in prison, I would go in, I already knew everybody, so I didn't need to establish myself. You know, I learned how to live off a little bit, so I didn't have to spend a lot of money. But I read, I worked out, the typical stuff you would hear about people in prison.
What did you read?
I read everything, primarily psychology. I've always been a big proponent of learning about people, because primarily while I was depressed, because I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. And from about the ages of 3.5 to about 12, I was chronically molested, raped, almost every night for years upon years. And as that process went on, it changes your nervous system. So there's a part of you that is you, that you were born into being, your natural character or disposition. And then there's the effect that the world has upon you, of the nature versus nurture. So by birth, I'm a curious child. I always wanted to learn more. I could read when I was 4 years old, that type of kid. But with everything that was pressed upon me, I became an anxious child, a paranoid child. And when I coupled that with the fact that I was so curious, it put me in a position where I was super hyper vigilant. I would always find myself looking for the danger in something, the threat into something. So I always wanted to learn about people because in essence, it would help me see them from further and further away and be able to recognize faster and faster if they were a threat as they came within personal distance.
That was deep. That was super deep. Did you, while reading the psychology books, find out a little bit about yourself in the process?
Originally, I believed that I had. But what I found myself running up against, so in prison, now I started therapy while on the street. I had a bout of depression and I had a suicide attempt. And now I would understand it more as a calling out for help. But in essence, what happened is I had cut myself and crashed my car on purpose. And so basically, I ended up in a place called the Westwood Lodge, and I did a 72-hour evaluation. I was released back into the streets. So I was dealing with a lot all the time, but around the time that I exposed to my family what I had went through in terms of growing up as a child, that's when I was at my rawest and my most open, so I tended to go through things much faster because I was walking around pretty much an open wound. So when I say I got to learn myself, originally, like I said, I believe that I had been learning about myself. But it's funny because I did not realize that we all have our personal filter. And no matter what I read, it was all processed through that filter. And it was that filter that was the problem to begin with. I couldn't change my filter. That's why it was so important for me to build with strangers and other people, because in essence, we're each other's mirrors. So I needed, in essence, somebody to sit back, listen to me, allow me to bounce off of them what I was going through so I could see it in their eyes and in their words and say, oh, that sounds like me, even though it's me who said that about me.
So with all this experience, you then use that now today. So let's talk about today, because you done went through the gamut of everything that anybody could ever experience. You've experienced it. And now today, what is the purpose of a flyer for you? Or what do your flyers say?
Okay, so my platform primarily is one of mental health. because especially in the inner city communities and the black community in general, it's certainly not spoken about often enough, and when it is, it's shut down as whether it's a phase, whether they'll get over it, whether they better toughen the fuck up or man up,
pray about it,
or pray it away. And you know, in all the things that I've been through, and all the, I'm not religious now, but in all the times that I've either asked God or the devil for help, I tended just to go through the same things I had always gone through. I started realizing that, you know, there's more to the word choice that we give credit to.
Absolutely.
And so the flyers that she's speaking of, which are around a lot of the inner cities, whether it's Boston, Chelsea, Lawrence, Lowell.
Oh, really?
Lynn, everywhere, yes. So
okay.
I've been to all of these places, and I plan to go to many more. And the first one began as me explaining a little bit. It had a picture of me with a gun in my waistband that the police had taken. And it had a picture, kind of the evolution of who I am now, holding my son. And so what ended up happening for me is I wanted a way to reach people, because the first thing, in order to get to somebody, you have to meet them where they are. You can't deal with potentials. You can't deal with, well, they could be's. You have to go where they are. And if they're in the streets right now, then you have to go to the street right now. So the posters primarily ask the question, if you go to jail, will the gang raise your child? And for me, I always call into question, how much personal responsibility do we take for our futures, our past, and definitely our present? And I always feel like fatherhood takes the back burner in society as a whole. Forget the inner city community as a whole. It's just not. It's not spoken about enough. And that's not to say there aren't single dads that are doing their thing and all that.
Shout out to all of the single dads that never get any credit.
Absolutely. And even more so, what I started realizing is the generation now, they're no more crazy or less crazier than I am. You know, it's just that a lot of us were taught wrong things from people that we trusted. So in essence, so it's like, I'll give you a quick example. So many people ask me, you know, when people hear your story, Christian, what is the first thing, you know, and they're all emotional and worked up, and, you know, they're inspired by you and sort of want to make a change in their life. You know, how do they begin to do that? And the first thing I say to them is, pat yourself on the back, because you're still here. Like, a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for the fact that you survived. I mean, how many times have not just myself, but many of us cheated death by stupid choices, by intentional choices, whatever the case may be. And we know we've cheated death, but we laugh at it. And it's like, we'll take it as a sign that we're supposed to do that even more. That's the thinking that I'm talking about.
I'm so blessed. I'm covered.
And that's the thinking that I'm talking about right now. And so for me, I began to understand, especially when I was in prison, but in general, that it was a matter of my thinking that I was truly up against. That whole kind of talk about you being your own worst enemy. I started realizing that although everything sort of happened to me, and I'm not saying I haven't done anything wrong, but in terms of the direct things that happened to me, that's fine, because those were other people's choices. But my journey of recovery is 100% on me. I make the choices on if I'm going to begin to take on a different perspective in the world. So when it came to the posters, I wanted to pose a question that would actually get people to say, why didn't I ever think of that? And, you know, obviously the answer is going to be no. I mean, anybody who's real, quote unquote, is not going to say, yeah, I want the gang to raise my kid.
Nah, but you see, in all the movies that I watch, you know what I'm saying? No, I'm just joking. But in all seriousness, in all the movies that I see, it's just like, you know, so-and-so goes to jail, don't worry about little man, don't worry about your wife, I got your kids, I'll hold your mama down. That's not real life?
Let me put it like this. I'm not in the mob. And most of the dudes I grew up with ain't in the mob neither. So, no. Real life is this. Real life is, I had to be reminded, this was just a month ago, I had to be reminded that one of my dead friends had been dead for a year. Because I thought it had been like 2 months. I had to be reminded what his kids look like when we went to the memorial because I don't reach out. I have a lot of dead friends. You know how hard it is to keep up with all them kids? I have so many friends in prison. You know how hard it is to keep up with all them kids? I can keep up with 2 or 3. But the reality is the streets don't raise you to be a father, a son, a brother. They raise you to be a nigga. And either you're gonna be a real nigga, quote unquote, or a sucker. And there's not much difference in terms of either one of them giving you any sort of fatherhood skills. But when you grow up in the streets and you're raised to be a nigga, you're raised to be real to the street reputation of your friend. And that's it. Being real doesn't require me to check on your kids. It may require me to die for you or shoot someone for you, but it doesn't require me to check on your kids. So it's like when I'm in jail, like I said, my son was born a few weeks after I got locked up. My friend was at the hospital and he makes good money while in the street. And you know, he gave my son a few onesies, diapers, things like that. And had he not gone to jail for almost 5 years a few months later, he may have very well bought him some sneakers or some Pampers, something like that.
But he wouldn't have raised him. He wouldn't have taken care of him. The streets will not raise your child if you get locked up.
Absolutely not. They will not. And anybody who tells you they will, you need to reevaluate exactly how they're going to raise your kid. And you know, not to get it messed up, I understand there are some people who may think about what I'm saying and they're like, well, you don't know my circumstance or my block's forever. And it's like, yeah. But the reality is if you're taught to be a real nigga, you're not taught to be a dad. The two do not go together. So it reached a point for me where I had to make the choice. Was I gonna be a father, a dad, or was I just gonna be a real nigga and everything that came with that, which for me personally, I did everything in the street I can think of except for tell on people and the stuff in jail or on the street that they say you're not supposed to do, and I don't have anything to show for it, but a Corey, but whatever the case may be. So the reality is in order for men to learn how to be men, first you have to acknowledge that what you were taught was not manhood in the sense of longevity. It was taught a very small part of surviving as a man within a particular type of jungle. And that the reality is most of us will not be raised and die in that jungle. Most of us will either go through prison on the life installment plan, or we'll just skip that and kill someone and get life. Or we'll find ourselves depressed, in and out of institutions, in and out of a job, in and out of a relationship, because none of these things are disconnected. They're all connected. And we'll find ourselves wondering, why can't I get it together? And the big reason why we don't seem to get it together is because we haven't really saw ourselves being valuable enough to get it together. We've only saw our worth as far as our real homies in the street determined it was.
That was probably the realest shit I've ever heard coming out of a man's mouth. I thank you for that. I hope somebody woke up to that. Let's say I'm walking down the street, I see one of your flyers, and I was completely ignorant to the multiple cities in which you extend yourself to. I call the number on the flyer because you know what? The streets, the gang isn't going to raise my child. I know that, I realize that, but what can you do for me?
So let's just say you're you and you have a 15-year-old.
I do.
And let's say it's your 15-year-old you're calling me about. He's not necessarily in the streets at the moment, but you can see the potential. You can see because after a certain point, parents pretty much just become the guardians of the children and the peer group takes over raising a child. So the hope is before that happens, we have given our child enough of a foundation to fall back on if they have a tough emotional decision to make.
Hold this right quick.
Absolutely.
I'm just checking you guys, making sure we're still good.
Are we still good?
We're still good.
Okay. Do you want me to hold the mic? Is your arm tired?
Go ahead. Go
ahead. So if you call me, and first of all, what she's talking about is attached to every flyer, there is my card. And this is my website, this is my email, and that is my cell phone number.
You get it? Y'all see it?
So if you call that number, that's me you're calling. Because what I felt is important is for somebody to have somebody with actual experience to talk to. Because so many people have great hearts, but they don't really connect with many people because they haven't been through certain things.
Yes.
So what I tend to tell moms first is, look, no matter what you may want to say to your child, understand that all behavior is learned. So this is not something that they're making up in their mind. They're either going through something, have learned something, whatever the case may be, and that's why they are what they are right now. So if you have a child and they're going through a struggle, first of all, when we talk about meeting people where they are, children are the most important people to meet where they are. If I'm not doing an interview, I mean, I may swear a couple of times, but if I'm in the street talking to youngsters, I'm talking like they're talking. Because I know that that's what they understand. And what happens with so many grown folks is they don't understand language of young people, so young people may come off as menacing, threatening, and that's just not the case. Reality is so many pastors, community workers miss a chance and an opportunity to actually truly save a soul, and the primary reason is a language barrier. They don't understand how some people call out for help. Because when you get these kids one-on-one, they soak up what you say. They soak, I swear, if you get these kids one-on-one, they will pour their heart out to you. They'll be strong in the street because they have to be.
Survival.
But they will give you the knowledge you need to break through to them. And it's in those moments. So if you're the mom talking to your son, first and foremost, you may have to do your best to disconnect the mother feeling. You may actually have to build up another set of skin that is able to deal with the fact that your son may be pissed off at you. He may want to call you names. He may dislike the fact that you're still giving his dad money who ain't been around in 12 years. Or, you know, the fact there's so many variables on why a child chooses to do something. But the reality is if you've been a single mom for so long, your kid is probably 98% you without you even realizing it. So any struggle that you faced, every stress that you exhibit, they show the same thing. It's just in their world and it comes out in their way.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
So, like, I'm really feeling this conversation. I'm feeling where you're coming from. And I'm wondering, have you ever considered going and getting that degree that makes you a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and actually, like, you do the work now without it? But do you ever see yourself having a couch?
No. And I'll tell you why. I mean, first,
because you got to meet people where they are.
Not just meet people where they are. Originally, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a child psychologist.
Really?
Yes. And but I mean, with my Corey, I would just be disallowed from doing certain things. If y'all don't know what's going on right now, we have a beautiful newborn in the back who is calling out for attention. And this is a good example because this child does not know how to express themselves except through crying and body motions. The same way, but a mom has to learn the language of her child. At this point, she knows that it's just a pacifier that needs readjusting or a leg that needs to be moved from being stuck in the car seat strap. And it's the same way you have to begin to observe your children. You got to understand that they're not going to speak the same language as you or understand life the same way you understand it, yet many of your understandings were distilled into them, but they're their own human. They have their own style. You need to take the time and be observant and learn their style. So many, and I'll get back to what you were asking about the couch, but so many people, they say Christian, you know, because they see the bond between my son and I, and they say, wow, I thought you've been a single dad for your whole life.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, The reason why my son and I have the bond we do is because we have come to respect one another and love one another. We both had a choice. He did not have to accept me as his father after almost 9 years.
Yes.
And I would have had to be okay with that. And so I love, this is what I love. The child cries, you give the child attention. Hi, baby. Hi. Sometimes I want another child, but I know it's only so I could go through the process of raising them.
Oh, because you missed.
Because I missed that. So that's kind of selfish. So, you know, and my son said that I'm allowed to have a woman in my life, but I can't have any children. Like, he literally wants all of my time. So let me get back to what I was saying in terms of meeting. I love this. I love this. Oh, I want to. Yeah, I want to hold the baby here. I want to hold the baby.
This is real life, impromptu, y'all.
Hold on. Y'all don't know how much I miss things like this.
Yeah, sit over here so the sun's not in his eyes. Wow. This is real life, you guys. Oh.
So this is what I'm getting at. The reality is I forget what I was saying. Oh, remind me, please, if you remember.
We're talking about you being a psychologist. You wanted to be a child psychologist when you were younger. And I asked you about the couch, and you're like, no.
Yes. So I knew that I was going in a different direction to bring it back to that, but since I forgot, I'll go back to that. The reason why, at this point, I don't want to do the one-on-ones is because, I'll be honest with you, I've come to realize that my value is so much greater. Like, I'll be honest, and it's not conceit, it's not anything. I've come to realize that there are so many facets and aspects of my story that it must mean that I'm here to deal with many people. And so the way that I figured this out that's what I was talking about. Thank you for reminding me. So when I thought of the baby, I thought about raising the baby. So what I was getting at is when I came home, I promised myself the one thing that I had to realize was my son did not ask to be here. So it was my responsibility to guide him. And if I wanted to guide him towards success, I first had to learn what success was. You know what I mean? I had to learn these things. And originally, all I could do was read because I have an uncle who's a great factor in my life. And so I had role models, but all the knowledge they had given me, I used for my own gain until I realized how to use them for the people. And so when I came home, the one thing that I said that I would not do is judge my son. I would watch him in his natural environment. And I would not question anything. Because so many, they'll be like, oh man, you growing up around your mom. Stop acting like that. Stop crying. Stop being girly. Stop being this. I did none of that. I actually watched him.
So can we speak on that for a second? Because that is like the whole man up, the whole, you know, sissy tendency, stop acting like a bitch, like that. Those are real things that are said on a regular basis to these young men. And, you know, they say it to each other. It's said so often to them that they're regurgitating what is being told to them, to their friends, to their peers, and then that cycle continues because then they have a child and then they say it to their own child. So can we discuss that? Like, how were you able to do that? To just say, you know what, I'm not gonna judge that. And then coming from gang life, I can only imagine the language that you guys use towards each other.
So to speak on that, what I have always believed. So there was a point when I was about 8 years old that I was trying to tell my dad what was going on. And he had this thing where, and many parents did it back then, where if you cried, you got hit more. Of course. But I could not explain to him that I was being molested because I couldn't say it without crying. So it never got out. And so, because every time I started to speak on it, I would start crying and it would hit me. And then I would obviously cry more. Mm-hmm. So it never got out. And then there was a point in time, I was in 5th grade. And I was double promoted, so I was younger than most kids. And my teacher was molesting me. And I told my dad about it. Because I couldn't have it. People who are victimized tend to be re-victimized. Because predators can see victims. They have their own sort of twisted symbiotic relationship. And so I was able to tell my dad about my teacher. So the next day, my dad brought me to the school. You know, I figured, you know, he's about to, you know, fuck him up, all this. So we get to the school and we're in the office and it was the principal, it was me and my dad. And they called the teacher down. And as soon as the teacher came in the room, I just started crying. I mean, and my dad was like, stop it, tell him what you, and I just couldn't stop crying. And so my dad grabbed me by the ear and he twisted it and he said, the stupid motherfucker must have been lying anyway. And I never forgot that. Like, it just like, it killed me inside. But I didn't realize till years later that it didn't kill me inside. It just opened up sort of a iCloud where all the emotions would go. So it was there. I just didn't acknowledge it. And so,
Mother, I have to say, as a mother, that break, where was your mother? Like, that's the only thing I'm thinking about. Like, where was your mother?
My biological mom gave me up at birth. And at this point, my dad was married to my stepmom.
Where was your stepmother?
Well, and this is the thing. It's like when you just spoke about how amongst men in the gang, there's the culture that's passed down. Don't cry, don't do this. Just, we regurgitate. My stepmom regurgitated any words and behaviors that my dad did.
And I also have to remind myself that at 39 years old, we were in a completely different culture as far as society was concerned.
Oh, absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, children were to be seen, not heard, and there wasn't, I'm thinking of, you know, me, myself, my son tells me anything and everything, things that I don't want to know about.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about that relationship, and if he would have told me anything, but going back to the relationship I had with my parents, it really wasn't one where I was able to be vocal.
Yes.
So I'm very angry and frustrated at that situation, not just for you, but in the climate of the country right now where women speaking up are being shut down, ignored, and told that, you know, that's a man's rite of passage. Thank you. Let's say, for instance, I see one of your flyers, and really quickly, what is the number that they can reach you at, website they can reach you at?
www.theonedayatattimedad.com. My phone number is 617-735-7853.
Say it one more time.
617-735-7853.
Website?
www.theonedayatattimedad.com.
So, if I see your flyer, Lynn, Lawrence, Holyoke, New Bedford, Springfield, Boston, and I am somebody in a gang.
Yep.
I'm a young boy. I'm one of these soldiers out here. I want to get out. Is there any way, can you help me with that?
Yes. So, you know, let me make it clear, and you know, everything for me is mental health based. So I continuously come back to that. Now, there are some realities. Some of us are really soldiers in the street, meaning there are people who are trying to kill us, and there are people that we are trying to kill. Most people in the streets are pretty much window decoration. You just see them. They're not doing nothing. They're not even like hustling. And you know, but the reality is murders do happen. That's the reality. So if you're a young man or a young woman and you are going through the struggle, and you call me, the first thing I'm going to try to do is assess what is a real threat. Because so many of us have post-traumatic stress without even knowing it, that we don't understand what's a real threat. Most times you don't need to carry a gun unless you're going to do something. But so many young men just carry it because they believe in the fear of a threat. And the way I try to do it is long-term solutions are long-term, but in the short term, if I can spend time with a child, talk to a child, reach out to them, in those moments, I know what they're doing. A lot of this is going to be from not just me. I'm literally one person. When I can afford gas money, things like that, I drive to these places. I mean, I'm just one person. But if you're someone in the street, somebody like me who was in the street, a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, whatever the case may be, check in with the kids. Like, you got to be aware of what your kids are doing. And not in the sense of to like necessarily bash them or whatever, but get to understand them.
What questions do I need to ask my son, my daughter, to find out where they are with the gang life or what relationship they may or may not have with the gang? And my son, though I feel has absolutely zero, minus 100% gang affiliation, he's still affiliated by neighborhood. He's still affiliated by bus that he takes. What questions do we as parents, aunties, guardians need to start asking these young people?
I mean, some of the questions are real basic. You know, it's like they say, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. You know, these are real basic ones. Now, amongst our culture, we know that you can look and play the part of a gangster, but really have no affiliation with it. Now, from an outsider's perspective, that's less clear. But specifically for parents with like you, if you say, I mean, it's like there are some. It's not necessarily telltale signs, because more kids listen to rap music and smoke weed that don't involve themselves in crime. You know, so it's like there are certain things that go on. But if you notice a sudden change in your kid, if your kid, especially if they were sort of staying out of the way, doing good in school, listening to you, if there's, you know, if within a month or 2 months they're like a totally different person, you need to be questioning how that came to be. You need to be taking extra time. And this is the thing. I understand there are single parents. I understand people work. And when I say take extra time, a part of what I mean by that is you as the parent continuously revolving, learning about yourself so you learn how to maximize the quality of the moments that you have. Because so many people say, well, I can't do this because I got to do this and that and that and that and that.
Excuses. When you're a parent, it's excuses at the end of the day, because think about how much time you spend on your phone, think about how much time you spend gossiping, how much time you spend on Facebook, how much time you could be spending with your child, asking the right questions.
And that goes back to patterns and routines. We all have them. We all have a pattern and routine. And the reason we have these is, I'm going to tell you exactly how it goes. So years ago, my therapist asked me, she said, Christian, do you think that you're perfect? And I said, well, of course not. She said, you know, do you feel like, you know, you're broken? I'm like, of course. Because all my life I said, if I could just fix this, this, and that, then I know I'd be good. And she said, Christian, what if I said you are perfect and you're not broken? And I'm like, okay, you know, we have a good rapport.
You haven't been listening to everything I've been saying, have you?
And so, you know, me and her have a good rapport at this point, and she's like, let me explain how it goes. She said, everybody develops a routine throughout life. And that routine consists of experiences. And what your experiences are in actuality are all parts. Oh, my little Eskimo. And so she said, Christian, look at yourself as a stereo system. I'm like, okay. She's like, you have the bass, treble, speakers, all these little doohickeys to make the perfect noise, not only to you, but all of these buttons to be able to adjust to the crowd you're in. And I said, okay. And she's like, as you grow up through life, the same way everybody grows up through life, you tend to make certain particular sounds and songs because all of us tend to go through our normal situations from the day we're born to the day we die. Now, she says what happens is there are some people who have the opportunity to explore more situations than others. And these are the people that are using more of the buttons they have. So that means they have more options than most people do. She said, then there's somebody like you who for so many years, night upon night, year after year, goes through a particular circumstance that you only learn one song. And you learn that song so thoroughly, it becomes second nature and it turns on even when the wind blows. That's how natural it comes for you to play that song. And the song, of course, are your defense mechanisms. These are the things that we do to survive. I was using one defense mechanism for so many years. And the thing with defense mechanisms is, while they're here to keep you alive, they're not here to help you build.
Or live. What do you need? Because you said something that I think is very important. You are one person, and you are one person, but you are definitely making an impact. You are making a change. I've heard firsthand the impact that Christian has made. What do you need? So I'm watching. I have resources. I have funding. I have opportunities. What do you need?
Primarily, it's this. I mean, obviously, I'm trying to build myself, my page. If I could travel the country telling my truth and support my son, that would be ideal. Reality is I tend to meet people. When I say meet people where they are, I mean when I meet a mother, father, or a gang member, I meet everybody where they are. Look in the mirror. That's the first thing I need everybody to do.
What do you need? What do you to continue doing the work that you're doing? To continue opening eyes, waking people up, enlightening people, saving souls, using your experience to...
Understood.
Okay.
The first thing I need is for everybody to go to my website. I have a donation. You can obviously send me anything and I'd appreciate it. All money goes towards, right now, everything I do is just with my phone. I mean, I would love to have cameras. I would love to interview people. I would love to set up places where I could rent spaces to hold meetings for gang members, for group therapy, for everything. Ultimately, it's word of mouth. If you know somebody who knows somebody, first and foremost, if you know people who need to hear from me, put me in touch with them first. If you know somebody that would like for me to speak to somebody, put me in touch with them second. If you know somebody who could guide me in towards of learning more about how the nonprofit world works, put me in touch with them. I want to eventually grow this. If you have funding, fund me. I mean, I would love to have camera equipment, money for ink, money for a more efficient laminating machine. I mean, there's so many ways to help me. So money's obvious. Everybody needs that.
Website again?
www.theonedayatatimedad.com. And this all started with my Facebook page, The One Day at a Time Dad. Visit it, watch the videos. Every week I'm uploading more videos to the website. See how I interact with my son. See how I interact with the community. See the struggles that I've been through and the struggles I still face. I'm evolving. So,
No, you're okay,
you sure?
okay.
I don't. And so what I want to get at is there's many ways that you can help me. Primarily, I want you to help me by taking the time to truly learn about yourself. That's really what this comes down to. Because don't get it messed up. While I know I help people, I'm very selfish too. And I love money, power, control, all of this stuff. And somebody told me, they said, Christian, you're only as good as you are evil. And it took me a while to understand that. And I realized that what I was doing I was doing evil for so long. And then I started thinking, what if I was doing this instead of that? And that's what I'm doing now. And it brought me to the conclusion that when I was a young boy going through what I went through, I always told myself that I was going to find a way to live forever. And I finally figured it out. The way that I can live forever is by affecting y'all. Because as long as y'all agree with me and see that I'm doing what I say that I'm doing, y'all are gonna teach the next people about me, and I'll be here forever. So that's my one little selfish goal of this all.
To live forever. I am Tayla Andre. Waking Up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. I love you. I thank you. I appreciate you. We are at Washington Mall, like literally in the hood. You guys heard the sounds of the hood. This is literally meeting us where we are. So thank you, Christian White. OneDayAtATimeDad.com, One Day at a Time on Facebook, One Day at a Time Dad on Facebook, and the number again,
617-735-7853.
And shameless plug, if you know anybody looking to buy or sell real estate in the state of Massachusetts, 617-459-0041. I have to say, Christian, you are the only person to hold my baby.
I love it. I love it.